Hello everybody, what's up and welcome back to the Starcraft 2 Own and Shack. It's David here today bringing you a Terran vs Zerg tutorial video. I do know it's been quite a while since I brought you one of these. Now, another thing I gotta mention, this is the first installment of Terran vs Zerg week. This week I'm gonna be bringing you everything Terran vs Zerg. Gonna have this tutorial slash strategy video for you of Terran vs Zerg. Also gonna have a Zerg vs Terran tutorial for you Zerg players out there. And then I'm going to be throwing in a commentary, a Zerg vs Terran commentary, and finally a first-person video, Masterly Quest episode of myself playing Terran vs Zerg. So it should be everything about this matchup, which is probably one of my favorite matchups right now, even though I do suck at it. It's definitely fun to play. It's got a lot of dynamics going on in it, and it should be an awesome week, so I hope you guys enjoy. And as you can see, first thing, we have a Terran player here, Empire Koss, going up against ATN Dark Force, great player. Done a commentary of him before, I believe. And yeah, I just want to draw attention to this. He's walling, sorry, he's not walling at all. That's what I meant to say. He's instead dropping his depot behind the minerals here. And the barracks, similarly, is not going to be used to wall off. And, well, you know what? I kind of got mixed feelings about this. Honestly, if I were you, I would wall off every time, especially on the ladder. There's a lot more cheese on the ladder than these guys are used to. Some things like, you know, the 2-base Roach Rush, 1-base Roach All-Ins, Baneling Bus, 6 pools, all of these things really strongly makes me suggest to you that you should wall off. But, of course, at the pro level, these strats are much less common, and so I think it's understandable why Koss has chosen not to do that. Now, everything has been standard up to this point. He is throwing down that refinery at the normal 13 supply, and going to be saturating that with 3 SCVs immediately. And now this is the point on this map, I think, that you should be scouting. Personally, I scout right after this depot is constructed. But one thing you'll notice about Koss is he hates scouting. As you can see just by his vision here, he doesn't even know where the Zerg is spawned yet. It's a one-on-one map, obviously. But, you know what? I do suggest you just get in there. If only just to see this expansion. This is huge. You need to know if he's expanding or not. Because the strategy we're going to be looking at, which is 2 factory play against Zerg, is quite atrocious versus a Roach All-In, so be careful, guys, seriously. Koss, this may be a great strategy, but he's playing in the dark, and that's never a place you want to be. So like I said, it is a 2-fact strat, and the second refinery is going to be necessary, obviously. 2 factories means a lot of gas early, and so he is going to be throwing that down at about 21 supply, or about 1/3 of the way when this first factory is completed. So, that's a good little timing to note. Now also, please note, as always, build order will be provided for you in the description of this video, so don't be frantically taking notes. I will do that part for you. So the main gist of this build that we're going to be looking at is applying early pressure with dual Factory Hellions with Infernal Pre-Igniter. And, well, what the main idea here is, it's just you want to deny getting a ton of drone saturation early and kill as many Zerglings and drones as possible. Doing this will put you economically ahead because we're going to be expanding behind this, and it will just basically give you an edge in the mid-game. So as you can see, the expansion should be coming pretty shortly here. There's the SCV getting ready to drop that. I do like the fact that he's dropping it over here instead of the usual spot right here. It means that the Zerglings that just ran up the ramp here would not get vision that he's expanding, and he might prepare for an all-in when in fact that's not the case. So, what's next here? As you can see, Tech Lab on that first factory going to be used to get Infernal Pre-Igniter immediately. And another thing, we may be getting Hellions, but look at this. Koss is still mining full saturation on his gas. And why is that, you might ask? Well, the basic reason is because of that roach push I was talking about. If our Zerg buddy here, Dark Force, decides to go for those roaches after he scouts these Hellions, imagine how screwed we would be without this extra gas to pump those siege tanks. Siege tanks are going to be needed almost immediately if we scout roaches, and with 2 factories, with tech labs, eventually this will have a tech lab as well. Getting those siege tanks should be no problemo whatsoever. So as you can see, tech labs galore. I really am enjoying this dual gas early. It just gives you so much gas to get those upgrades at a decent point in the game. And as you can see, the Zerglings run up there, but they don't get any intel because these factories have not been placed at the ramp. So that's another reason why he might have chosen to put his barracks back here. So as you can see, more Hellions coming out all the time. Obviously, he's let Dark Force seen that first Hellion, which was used to scout, and let's just take a look at the info he got. All he basically was looking for was this expansion. And I guess that's important. You might want to try and run into the main, see if you can see if he's getting more gas for a Roachwarren or Baneling nest. But I do digress. That is not the case here. Still going to get Hellions regardless. I guess he just feels safe in doing that. And also, going to be getting a second Racks as well. Please note, of course, Stim is coming out at the same time. Like I said, all this extra gas, because we're only getting Hellions, has to be put somewhere. And upgrades like Siege Tech and Stim are perfect places to just dump that gas. So you can have fully upgraded Siege Tanks when they finally come out. So once he has, let's just take a look here. Units tab, he's got 5 Hellions now, and at that point he's going to be switching over to Siege Tanks. These 5 Hellions, he should be able to do significant damage. And if we just look at the production tab, we should see, yeah, Glial Reconstitution coming up, and he's forcing some roaches, which is always great. The main idea, like I said, is you don't want him to be droning up throughout all this. Now, as you can see, he's going to take out a bunch of Zerglings here, and yeah, the Hellion control was pretty terrible, but you know what? You do what you got to do. If we look at the units tab, it's 38 drones to 34 SCVs with 2 mules, so it's still very even, which is probably a good trade for Terran, because typically at this point, Zerg would have an economic advantage if you were allowed to drone up. One thing I do want to point out, if you manage to kill things with those Hellions and you let them survive, which which Cost did not manage to do here, and you bring them back to repair, you can do a really nice timing push later in the game with those Hellions much earlier than we're going to see here otherwise from Cost. So do keep that in mind. I do suggest you make every effort to save those Hellions. Trading them all in for drones might seem like a good idea, but honestly I'd rather be more conservative and bring them back for later use. So as you can see, yeah, sure, Dark Force got a ton of roaches to block those Hellions, but because all that gas was mined so early, the siege tank count, 4 siege tanks already with a bunker, that's pretty sweet. I mean, there's pretty much nothing that Dark Force is going to be able to do to penetrate that right now, despite how many roaches he gets. And the other thing I like here, Cost is keeping those Marines up here in case of Mutalisks, but as you can see, if he had any scouting intel whatsoever, he'd know there were no Mutalisks coming. It was instead a roach push. The lair was used, of course, for the Glial Reconstitution, which came out of the Roachwarren. So, yeah, it just shows you how good scouting can be. Just a few extra Marines down here can mean the difference between living through an all-in Roachling push. So, just keep that in mind. Also, he's getting those turrets. Like I just said, if he had scouted, he would have known Mutalisks were nowhere near on the way. So, again, minerals being dumped into unnecessary structures, definitely not something you want to have happen. So the Starport's now coming out, and the Marines are almost fully upgraded. The only thing they're missing is the combat shield, which is pretty much done. And it looks like that's going to be his timing here. He wants to push right as he gets his combat shield. And just one thing I do want to point out, look at that. Leaving 1 bunker and 1 siege tank behind is something you absolutely must do on a map like Xel'Naga Caverns, where counterattacks can come from every which way. Just love that play. So he's going to be pushing up right to the edge of the creep and sieging up there, taking out a bazillion creep tumors, as you can see, and basically trying to force a bunch of units. And looks like his efforts were successful. Again, taking a look here, SCVs to drones still very even if we include mules there. So Dark Force is being kept at bay in terms of his drone saturation from just tiny little pressure pokes like that. Look at that, he just pulled right back, didn't have to do any damage at all, and he was still 100% content. And now if you look, I mean, the siege tank count is getting pretty ridiculous. 9 siege tanks, 34 Marines, and now he's even starting to get those medevacs. So Cost has effectively gotten his economy up. He has teched fully, pretty much fully. He's just missing that tier 3. And he's just got a ridiculous siege tank count, the critical unit, right here. So basically the idea now is to just mass up, probably expand to that 3rd base, and then just do a ridiculous push through the middle lane here. And another thing I want to note is adding more production facilities now that he's got a full 2-base economy running. If I were him, or if I were you rather, I guess, I would instead wall off with those right here. You never want a counterattack through this lane. It's so hard to block. But anyways, now that he has a ridiculous amount of siege tanks, as we can see. He does feel like he can push up and take this third out easily, whereas before he just didn't feel like he had enough. And with this position, as you can see, there's absolutely no chance in hell that that expansion is going to live. Zerg can try and run up, but the position that Terran's in is absolutely fantastic. Units into a choke against siege tanks is never a place you want to be. And yeah, I mean, Dark Force pays the price right there. He should have just sacked the expansion, pulled back, re-expanded to the gold. There's really no other option when you have this many siege tanks in such a choke position. So, Kos is going to force that expansion to die, and he's going to pull back and regroup. As you can see, he's been massing up more, leaving a few units behind to defend against those counterattacks that I mentioned. And that's just a great thing to do all around. He also is getting that armory. Yep. I would like to see an earlier armory from him, just so you can get that +1 attack on the siege tanks so they can one-shot Zerglings with Carapace. But in this particular game, I believe that the Carapace was not even researched, yeah. So it doesn't really matter too much here. So now that he's taken that expansion, it's time to pull back. And what I like about this particular strat right now is he's pulling back through the high ground, which will allow him to siege up nicely here in case of a Zerg block. If you were to push through here, you would be caught in a really wide open area, and that's never somewhere you want to be. And as you can see, he had a bunch of units back here, so he will be able to defend this counterattack. Obviously, the tanks were unsieged, so it's going to do more damage than it should have, but still you get the gist of what I'm saying here, and the reinforcements from that earlier push should come back to clean these roaches up pronto. And there you have it. Goodbye. So he has already gotten that third up, ready to expand to this location. Sadly for Kos, creep tumors are blocking his way, and it's almost worth it right now to get a Raven out because of the fantastic creep spread of his Zerg opponent. I feel like scanning for these is just becoming inefficient right now. You'd much rather be scanning for the army or dropping mules, so just my 2 cents on that. And yeah, should be good to go from there. So we now have the +1 vehicle weapons coming for Terran, and that's going to be, as I said, instrumental since Carapace is on the way. He's going to have that up well in time. That's really an awesome thing. The one thing I think that Kos might want to be wary of right now is a Mutalist switch. Mutas right now would be quite good against what Kos has right here. I mean, Marines, yeah, obviously they're great against Mutalists, but with this many siege tanks, you need a Thor to cover the entire areas. Marines just don't have the range, so one Thor with this would be a wise decision if you were to scout Mutalists, just given the possible scenarios that could arise from something other than really heavy Roach Baneling play that we're seeing here from Dark Force. So the expansion should now be able to land once this creep recedes, and there it goes. And he's already got lots of SCVs mining right now. He's got 57 to 59, so as you can see, very even economies, both players. Oh my gosh. I'm just going to have to look at the income tab right now just for some giggles to see that skyrocket with those mules. Yeah, as you can see, he's going to be pulling well over almost 2,500. Yeah, he just hit 2,500 there for a second. And that's really why I think the Raven is a better choice. Especially when you're getting so many Marines, you really do have the gas to afford. As you can see, he's got lots of gas there, so 200 gas for Raven would be a wise investment, as well as that Thor, as I said, to protect these siege tanks in the back. So now, with his main game plan, push down this lane in order to deal massive damage to this expansion. Of course, that's going to leave his Expo very wide open to a Zerg counterattack. So what he's going to be doing right now, as you can see, is pulling back 3 tanks to defend this location. This will make it very cost inefficient for this counterattack to occur. As you can see, the siege tank's already picking off stuff before they even get close. Planetary Fortress dealing some damage. He does lose it, but Zerg is going to pay the price here. He lost a bunch of units to do that, sacked a ton of Banes, and as you can see from the units lost tab, he's just not being cost efficient right now. Meanwhile, Zerg may have taken that out, but he still has not eliminated the huge Terran presence right here. Bunch of 1 upgraded siege tanks and just massive amounts of Marines is going to be fantastic against anything, almost anything that comes through here. Again, with a counterattack, siege tanks back here all ready to slow it down and take out a bunch of units. If you do have the APM, you might want to focus down the Banes in all of this. Let the Marines try and clean up the Roaches. But as you can see, with good Marine splitting right now, it's it's just going to be a lot. And it still hasn't relinquished that position he's taken, and he's finally eliminated that gold base, meanwhile dropping over here just to do more damage to this base. So really, Kaz has a stranglehold on the game. I really feel like the GG was forced because of those two factories. Just getting out so many siege tanks early against a Zerg player who goes for those roaches is so powerful, and I really hope you Terran players learn from this tutorial. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again for another daily dose of ownage in Terran vs Zerg Week.